3 months into his first year at Ilvermorny, Draco noticed the roots. He was brushing his teeth in the dormitory bathroom when he caught sight of them in the mirror, a thin line of platinum blonde at his scalp, stark against the dark brown he'd maintained since that first terrifying night in Queens. Marcus was already asleep, his gentle snoring drifting through the open bathroom door. The castle was quiet, settled into the peaceful rhythm of a Thursday night. Draco had a transfiguration essay due tomorrow and a defense practical to prepare for, but he stood frozen, staring at those telltale roots. 3 months. Had it really been 3 months since he'd last done this? Time moved differently here. At Hogwarts, every day had felt like survival, navigating his father's expectations, avoiding Potter's attention, maintaining the careful facade of a proper Malfoy heir. But at Ilvermorny, time flowed like water, smooth and purposeful. Days blended into weeks, weeks into months, and suddenly he was standing here realizing he'd let his disguise slip. Not that anyone would recognize him. The British ministry's search had gone cold, according to Director Fontaine. Voldemort was still gathering power in the shadows, still recruiting, but his focus remained on Britain. America was an ocean away, and Daniel Morgan was just another brilliant student at Ilvermorny. Still, Draco retrieved the hair dye from the cabinet beneath the sink, the same brand he'd used that first time, purchased during his initial trip to the Muggle district of Boston with Director Fontaine. The box was familiar now, the instructions memorized. He'd done this ritual twice since arriving in America, and each time it felt less like desperation and more like maintenance, commitment, a choice he made over and over again. He mixed the dye with practiced efficiency, the chemical smell sharp in the small bathroom. As he worked the mixture through his roots, careful and methodical, Draco found his mind drifting. In his first life, he'd been so proud of his platinum hair. It was a Malfoy trademark, a visible symbol of his pureblood heritage. His father had taught him to carry it like a crown, to let it mark him as superior to the masses of ordinary wizards with their ordinary brown and black and red hair. Now he covered it deliberately, repeatedly, without hesitation. The irony wasn't lost on him. He set the timer on his wand 15 minutus and sat on the edge of the bathtub, waiting. The dye tingled against his scalp, familiar and grounding. This small ritual had become a meditation of sorts, a moment to reflect on how far he'd come and how much further he still had to go. Tomorrow, he'd attend his fourth-year classes. He'd work on his independent research project, analyzing runic evolution with Professor Whitmore. He'd tutor Tommy in arithmancy and help Keisha perfect her conjuration technique. He'd be Daniel Morgan, brilliant and confident and accepted. But tonight, in this quiet bathroom with dye in his hair and the weight of 2 lives pressing on his shoulders, he was simply himself, whoever that was. The timer chimed softly. Draco rinsed the dye out, watching the water run dark brown down the drain, carrying away any trace of platinum blonde. When he looked up, the face in the mirror was familiar: dark hair, grey eyes, the same sharp features, but somehow softer than they'd been at Hogwarts. Daniel Morgan looked back at him, and for the first time, Draco didn't feel like he was looking at a stranger. Fourth year at Ilvermorny was nothing like Draco's first fourth year had been. At Hogwarts, fourth year had meant the Triwizard Tournament, Potter's name coming out of the goblet, the growing tension as Voldemort's return drew closer. It had meant watching his father's increasing involvement with the Death Eaters, feeling the noose of expectation tightening around his neck. Here, fourth year meant freedom. The theoretical limit of transfiguration, Professor Whitmore said, pacing before the class, is not actually a limit of magic itself, but a limit of human comprehension. We cannot transform what we cannot fully conceptualize. Draco sat in the front row of the Transfiguration classroom, his quill moving rapidly across parchment. Since he'd stopped hiding his abilities, Whitmore had begun including more advanced theoretical concepts in her lectures, and the challenge was intoxicating. Consider the transformation of lead to gold, Whitmore continued. Alchemically possible, yes, but requiring such precise understanding of atomic structure, of magical resonance, of the fundamental nature of matter itself, that most wizards will never achieve it. The magic is willing. The wizard is not sufficiently knowledgeable. She turned to the class. This is why theoretical study matters. The more deeply you understand the underlying principles, the more complex your practical applications can become. Mr. Morgan, would you elaborate on the relationship between arithmetic precision and transfiguration stability? Draco didn't hesitate. Transfiguration operates on mathematical principles, conservation of mass, the equivalence of magical energy, the resonance frequencies of different materials. Every successful transformation requires an unconscious calculation of these variables. The more consciously we understand the mathematics, the more precisely we can control the outcome. He stood, moving to the board. For example, transforming a desk into a pig requires accounting for the mass differential, the organic versus inorganic nature of the materials, the introduction of consciousness and biological systems. If we map it arithmetically, he began writing equations, his hand moving quickly across the board. The formulas flowed naturally, each variable precisely placed, each calculation building on the last. This was what he'd been doing in his head for years, the unconscious mathematics that made him exceptional at transfiguration. But now he could articulate it, share it, teach it, which gives us a stability coefficient of approximately 0.87, well within the acceptable range for permanent transformation. But if we wanted to improve that stability, we'd need to adjust the magical input here. He tapped the board to compensate for the consciousness variable. When he turned back, Professor Whitmore was smiling. Excellent. That level of analysis is exactly what separates competent transfiguration from mastery. For homework, I want each of you to select a fourth-year transformation and map its complete arithmetic structure. Mr. Morgan, I'd like you to tackle something more advanced, perhaps the theoretical framework for animagus transformation. Yes, Professor. As he returned to his seat, Keisha leaned over. You know, you just explained in 5 minutes what took me 3 weeks to understand, right? Draco felt heat rise in his cheeks. I've always thought about it mathematically. Well, some of us aren't walking arithmancy textbooks, she said, but she was grinning. You're still helping me with conjuration tonight, right? Of course. The casual acceptance still surprised him sometimes. At Hogwarts, his intelligence had been expected. Malfoy's were supposed to be exceptional. But it had also been isolating, setting him apart, making him a target for jealousy and resentment. Here, brilliance was celebrated, shared, used to lift others up rather than establish hierarchy. It was nice. Defense against the dark arts had always been Draco's strongest subject, though for darker reasons than his professors knew. In his first life, he'd learned defensive magic out of necessity first to survive Hogwarts politics, then to survive the war, and finally to survive being a Death Eater in Voldemort's inner circle. He'd learned to duel, to shield, to strike first, and ask questions never. He'd learned that hesitation meant death, and mercy was weakness. He'd learned to be a weapon. Here, Professor Hawthorne taught defense as both art and science, with elegant theory behind shield charms, the strategic thinking required for combat, the ethical considerations of when and how to use force. Positioning is everything, Hawthorne said, gesturing to the tactical map spread across her desk. The fourth-year class gathered around, studying the scenario. Mr. Morgan, walk us through this setup. Draco studied the MAPA simple corridor layout with limited cover and two opposing forces. His classmates leaned in, watching him. This was the part that sometimes worried him. The part where his knowledge came from experience rather than books, where he had to be careful not to reveal too much about what he'd lived through. But Hawthorne had noticed his tactical thinking early on. You have good instincts, she'd said, after one particularly well-executed practical. I want you to help explain positioning to the class. So he did. First priority is controlling the sight lines, Draco said, pointing to the map. We don't know their capabilities, so we can't afford to be caught in the open. I'd position our shield caster here. He tapped a corner position with support behind. That gives us cover and a clear view of approaches. Why not advance? Asked a Wampus student named Derek. Take the initiative, because advancing without information is reckless. In an unknown situation, defense is safer than offense. We hold position, force them to come to us, and control the engagement. He continued, walking them through angles of attack, shield placement, communication signals. The words came easily, born from memories of actual battles, actual life-or-death decisions. What if they flank us? Keisha asked. Then we fall back to this position. Draco indicated a narrower section of corridor. Reduce their advantage, maintain our defensive formation. The goal isn't to win gloriously, it's to survive and neutralize the threat. Hawthorne nodded approvingly. Exactly right. Mr. Morgan understands that real combat isn't about flashy spells, it's about strategy, positioning, and staying alive. For your practical next week, I want you all to apply these principles. After class, Derek caught up with Draco in the hallway. That was intense, man. Where'd you learn to think like that? Draco's mind raced. What could he say that was true but not too true? I read a lot, he said finally. Military strategy, historical battles, tactical theory. It's all applicable to magical combat if you think about it the right way. Ha! I mostly just practiced stunning spells, Derek grinned. Maybe I should hit the library more. It helps, Draco said, relieved that the explanation had been accepted. But as Derek walked away, Draco felt the familiar weight of his secret. He wasn't just well-read. He'd lived through a war. He'd fought in battles where people died, where one wrong move meant death, where the stakes were survival itself. That knowledge made him valuable here, but it also made him dangerous. He had to be careful, always careful. Potions had never been Draco's favorite subject, but he'd been good at it, precise, methodical, patient. At Hogwarts, Snape had favored him, given him preferential treatment, used him as an example of Slytherin superiority. Professor Mertz had no such biases. Your technique is flawless, Mr. Morgan, she said, examining his draft of peace with a critical eye. But flawless technique without understanding is just recipe following. Tell me why you added the powdered moonstone in 2 increments rather than all at once. Draco had added it in increments because that's how Snape had taught him, but he'd never questioned why. Now, standing in the potions laboratory with Mertz's sharp gaze on him, he had to actually think about it. The moonstone contains calming properties that activate when heated. Adding it incrementally allows each portion to integrate fully before introducing more, preventing the potion from becoming too sedative. Correct. And what would happen if you added it all at once? The potion would be more powerful initially, but less stable. It might induce sleep instead of peace, and the effects would fade rapidly instead of lasting the full 8 hours. Mertz nodded, satisfied. Exactly. Potions is chemistry, Mr. Morgan. Every ingredient, every technique, every timing choice has a chemical reason behind it. The more you understand the why, the more you can innovate. She gestured to the workbench beside her, where several student potions sat in various states of success. These are from your classmates attempting the draft of peace. Some succeeded, some failed. Can you identify why this one, she pointed to a murky grey potion, didn't work? Draco studied the potion, noting the color, the consistency, the faint, acrid smell. His mind worked through the chemistry, the magical interactions, the delicate balance required. They added the syrup of hellebore too early, he said slowly. Before the moonstone had fully integrated, the hellebore reacted with the incomplete moonstone compound and created a neutralizing effect. The potion lost its calming properties entirely. Very good. So how would you fix it? You can't fix it once it's gone wrong. You'd have to start over, and this time wait for the moonstone to fully dissolve. You can tell by the color shift from white to pale blue before adding the hellebore. Mertz smiled, a rare expression on her usually stern face. You have good instincts, Mr. Morgan. I'm assigning you some supplementary reading on potion theory. If you're interested in understanding the chemistry behind the magic, I have several texts that might challenge you. As Draco left the potions classroom, his mind was already racing with possibilities. This was different from following recipes, different from perfect technique. This was understanding, innovation, pushing the boundaries of what potions could do. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure, but it was in ancient runes where Draco truly came alive. His independent research project with Professor Whitmore had evolved into something far beyond a simple class assignment. They met twice a week in her office, surrounded by ancient texts and runic dictionaries, tracing the evolution of magical language from Proto-Germanic origins through modern applications. "Look at this," Draco said, spreading out his latest analysis across her desk. The younger Futhark runes used in 9th century Scandinavia simplified from the elder Futhark, right? Fewer runes, more phonetic efficiency. Correct, Whitmore said, leaning over to examine his work. But the magical applications didn't simplify. If anything, they became more complex. The wizards of that era were doing more with less, using 16 runes to accomplish what their ancestors did with 24. He pulled out another parchment, covered in equations. "I've been mapping the magical resonance of each rune using arithmetic principles. And I found something interesting. The simplified runes don't have less power, they have more focused power. It's like concentrating a potion. You remove the excess, and what remains is more potent." Whitmore's eyes widened. "You're suggesting that runic simplification was intentional magical optimization, not just linguistic evolution." "Exactly. And if that's true, then we should be able to apply the same principle to modern runic magic. Take a complex runic sequence and simplify it without losing efficacy. Maybe even increase efficacy. That's, Mr. Morgan, that's advanced theoretical work. If you can prove this theory, I think I can." Draco's hands were shaking slightly with excitement. "I've been working on a test Cassia basic protection ward that normally requires a 12-rune sequence. I've simplified it to 8 runes using the optimization principles I found in the younger Futhark evolution. The arithmetic calculations suggest it should be just as strong, possibly stronger." "Have you tested it?" "Not yet. I wanted to show you the theory first." Whitmore stood, moving to her bookshelf. "There's a testing chamber in the basement wooded space where we can safely experiment with new runic configurations. If your theory works, Daniel, this could be significant research. This is the kind of work that advances the field." Draco felt a surge of pride so intense it almost hurt. In his first life, his intelligence had been a tool, something to use for his father's approval, for house points, for survival. But this was pure intellectual discovery. This was contributing something meaningful to magical knowledge. This was what he'd always wanted to do if he'd ever been free enough to want anything. "When can we test it?" he asked. "Tomorrow afternoon. Clear your schedule." That evening, Draco found himself in the library with his usual study group: Tommy, Keisha, Marcus, and Jake. They'd claimed their regular table by the window, books and parchments spread across the surface in organized chaos. "Okay, explain it one more time," Tommy said, staring at his arithmancy homework with desperation. "Why does the lunar phase affect the calculation?" Draco pulled the parchment toward him. "Because magical resonance fluctuates with celestial bodies. The moon affects tides, right? It also affects magical tides, ebb, and flow of ambient magic in the environment. During a full moon, magical resonance is higher, so your calculations need to account for that increased power. During a new moon, it's lower, so you need to compensate. But how do I know how much to compensate?" "There's a formula," Draco wrote it out quickly. "You take the base magical coefficient, multiply by the lunar phase modifier, and adjust for your personal magical resonance." "It looks complicated, but once you do it a few times, it becomes intuitive," Tommy groaned. "Nothing about arithmancy is intuitive." "It is for Daniel," Keisha said, grinning. He probably does these calculations in his sleep. I don't, Draco started, then stopped. Because honestly, he kind of did. Numbers had always made sense to him in a way that people rarely did. Okay, maybe a little. Show off, Marcus said affectionately. Hey, can you look at my potions essay? I'm not sure I explained the Moonstone interaction correctly. Draco took the essay, reading through Marcus's explanation of the draft of peace. This is good, but you're missing the chemical component. It's not just magical interaction, there's actual chemistry happening. The Moonstone compounds react with the heat to create the calming effect. You need to mention that. How do you even know that? Professor Mertz has been making me think about the chemistry behind everything. It's actually really interesting once you start looking at potions as chemical reactions enhanced by magic rather than just magic. Jake looked up from his defense notes. Speaking of defense, that tactical explanation you gave today was brilliant. I never thought about positioning that way. I just applied some strategic thinking. You made it look easy, which it definitely isn't. Jake hesitated. Can I ask you something? Sure. Where did you learn all this? I mean, you're 14, and you're doing independent research that Professor Whitmore says is advanced work. That's not normal, even for Horned Serpent. The table went quiet. Draco felt 4 pairs of eyes on him, curious and concerned. This was the moment. He could deflect, change the subject, maintain the careful distance he'd always kept. Or he could trust them. The way he'd learned to trust Sage, the way he'd learned to trust his professors. I had a complicated education before I came here, Draco said carefully. I learned a lot very young, and not all of it was conventional. When I came to Ilvermorny, I had knowledge that didn't match my age. I tried to hide it at first, but that didn't work out well. So you just decided to be brilliant instead? Keisha asked. More or less. Good choice, Tommy said firmly, because you're helping me pass arithmancy, and I would definitely fail without you. The tension broke. They returned to their homework, the moment passing without drama or suspicion, just acceptance. Draco bent over his own work, the runic analysis. He'd been preparing for tomorrow's test and felt something warm settle in his chest. These were his friends. Real friends who knew he was brilliant and strange and secretive, and who liked him anyway. At Hogwarts, he'd had allies, followers, people who associated with him because of his name. Here he had friends. The difference was everything. Later that night, Draco stood at the window of his dormitory, looking out over the lake. Marcus was asleep, his breathing steady and peaceful. The castle was quiet. Tomorrow, he'd test his runic theory. He'd continue learning potion chemistry. He'd help Keisha with conjuration and Tommy with arithmancy. He'd attend his fourth-year classes and push himself to understand more, learn more, become more. He'd be Daniel Morgan, brilliant and confident and accepted. But tonight, with dark brown hair and grey eyes and the weight of 2 lives pressing on his shoulders, he was simply himself. Draco Malfoy had been a frightened boy trying to survive his father's expectations and a Dark Lord's war. Daniel Morgan was a scholar, a friend, a teacher, a researcher. And somewhere between those 2 identities, someone new was emerging. Someone who could be brilliant without apology, who could share knowledge without superiority, who could build genuine connections without fear. Someone who was finally, impossibly, free to become whoever he wanted to be. The moon reflected off the lake, silver and serene. Draco smiled. Tomorrow would be extraordinary, but tonight, this quiet moment of peace was enough. The ancient runes tower classroom was empty when Draco arrived, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the carved stone tablets that lined the walls. Professor Whitmore was at her desk, reviewing what looked like advanced runic sequences, her silver hair catching the light. She looked up as he entered. Mr. Morgan, I wasn't expecting you until our research session tomorrow. Draco's hands were sweating. He'd rehearsed this conversation a dozen times in his head, but now that he was here, the words felt inadequate. Professor, I wanted to ask you about something. A different kind of advanced study. Whitmore set down her quill, giving him her full attention. Go on. I want to pursue animagus transformation. The words came out in a rush. I know it's advanced magic, and I know it takes months of training, but I've been reading about the theoretical framework and the way it requires complete understanding of one's own magical core, the integration of human consciousness with animal form, the runic principles underlying the transformation. It's exactly the kind of deep magical study that He trailed off, realizing he was rambling. That you what? Whitmore's voice was gentle. Draco took a breath. That I need, not just need, to prove to myself that I can master something this difficult. That I can transform myself completely, by choice, through my own skill and understanding. The double meaning hung in the air between them. Whitmore studied him for a long moment, her dark eyes thoughtful. Animagus transformation is one of the most demanding branches of transfiguration magic, she said finally. It requires absolute precision, unwavering focus, and a level of self-knowledge that most wizards never achieve. The failure rate is high. The magical strain is considerable. And the process takes a minimum of 2 months of intensive daily work. I understand. Do you? She stood, walking to the window. This isn't like our runic research, Daniel. This isn't theoretical work you can puzzle through with equations and logic. This requires you to confront every aspect of who you are, your fears, your desires, your fundamental nature. The magic will force you to see yourself with absolute clarity. No hiding, no performance, just truth. Draco's throat was tight. I know. Whitmore turned back to him, and there was something knowing in her expression. Why now? You've been here for months. Why pursue this particular magic at this particular time? Because I've spent my whole life being told who I should be, Draco thought. Because I ran away from one identity and built another, and now I need to prove I can choose my own transformation. Because I want to be free in a way that goes beyond geography or new names. Because I'm ready, he said simply. Because I understand now that transformation isn't about running away from who you were. It's about choosing who you become. Whitmore smiled. Then we begin tomorrow. Clear your schedule for early mornings. We'll work before breakfast. And Mr. Morgan, this will be the hardest thing you've ever done. Good, Draco said. I'm tired of easy. The first week was meditation. Draco sat cross-legged on a cushion in Whitmore's office, eyes closed, trying to find the still point at the center of his magic. It should have been simpler, just breathe, just focus, just be, but his mind wouldn't quiet. You're fighting it, Whitmore said from her chair. Stop trying to force the meditation. Let it happen. I am letting it happen. You're clenching your jaw. Your shoulders are up by your ears. You're holding your breath every third inhale. Her voice was patient but firm. The magic can't flow through tension, Daniel. You have to release control to gain it. Draco exhaled sharply, frustrated. That doesn't make sense. It doesn't have to make sense. It has to be felt. She stood, moving behind him. Close your eyes again. This time, don't think about your magic. Think about water, how it flows around obstacles instead of fighting through them, how it finds its own level, how it's powerful precisely because it doesn't resist its own nature. He tried again. Breath felt the magic humming under his skin, wild and restless, tried to let it flow instead of controlling it. His mind immediately flooded with images. The Slytherin common room, his father's cold voice, the dark mark burning in the sky, Narcissa's face when he'd left without saying goodbye, the dingy apartment in Queens, the terror of being discovered. Breathe through it, Whitmore said quietly. Don't push the thoughts away. Acknowledge them and let them pass. Like water around stone. It took 3 more sessions before he managed even 5 minutes of true stillness. By the end of the first week, he could hold it for 20. The second week, they began the theoretical work. Animagus transformation is fundamentally different from standard transfiguration, Whitmore explained, spreading out diagrams across her desk. In normal transfiguration, you're imposing your will on external matter. But in animagus work, you're transforming your own physical form while maintaining your human consciousness. The magic has to rewrite your body at the cellular level while preserving your mind intact. Draco studied the runic sequences that governed the transformation. They were elegant, complex, and absolutely unforgiving. One mistake, one moment of imprecision, and the transformation could go catastrophically wrong. The animal form isn't chosen, Whitmore continued. It's revealed. The magic will show you what you are not what you want to be, but what you fundamentally are at your core. Some wizards spend months in meditation and never discover their form because they can't accept what the magic shows them. How do you know when you've found it? You'll know. The form will feel inevitable, like recognizing something you've always known but never consciously acknowledged. That night, Draco dreamed of flying. Not on a broom, but with wings-black wings that cut through the air with effortless precision. He woke with his heart racing and the phantom sensation of feathers against his skin. The third week, the physical training began. The transformation requires you to hold two complete mental images simultaneously, Whitmore explained. Your human form and your animal form in perfect detail. You need to know every bone, every muscle, every organ of both bodies. The magic will use those images as a template. She handed him a stack of books on avian anatomy. Start reading. Draco spent hours in the library, memorizing the skeletal structure of birds, the way their hollow bones reduced weight for flight, the complex musculature of wings, the unique respiratory system that allowed for sustained aerial activity. He drew diagrams until his hand cramped, labeled every bone and feather, studied the way light refracted through different types of plumage. At night, he practiced the meditation, sinking deeper into his magical core. And every time, he felt the pull toward something dark and winged and free. By the fourth week, he was ready to attempt the first stage of transformation. We'll start small, Whitmore said. Just your hand. Transform it to match your animal form and hold it for 10 seconds. That's all. Draco closed his eyes, centering himself in the meditation. He felt his magic rise, warm and electric. He held the image of his human hand in his mind-pill skin, long fingers, the small scar on his thumb from a potions accident in second year. Then he overlaid it with the other image, black feathers, hollow bones, talons sharp and precise. He spoke the incantation, felt the magic surge through him pain. Blinding, searing pain as his bones tried to reshape themselves. His hand convulsed, fingers elongating wrong, skin rippling but not transforming. He gasped and released the magic, stumbling backward. Again, Whitmore said calmly. It took 17 attempts before he managed even a partial transformation, his fingers briefly covered in black feathers before snapping back to human. By the end of the session, his hand was shaking with magical exhaustion. Good, Whitmore said. Tomorrow we'll try for 15 seconds. The fifth week was when Draco almost quit. The magical strain was constant now, a bone-deep exhaustion that no amount of sleep could cure. His hand had transformed successfully, then his arm, then both arms. But each new stage required exponentially more power, more focus, more absolute precision. He was attempting a partial torso transformation when something went wrong. The magic twisted, his ribs compressing too fast, and suddenly he couldn't breathe. Panic flooded through him, breaking his concentration, and the transformation snapped back so violently that he collapsed to the floor, gasping. Whitmore was there immediately, her wand out, checking him for damage. Breathe, slowly, you're all right. I can't, Draco's voice was ragged. I can't do this, it's too much. The magic is too what? Too big. Every time I try to hold the full transformation in my mind, it's like trying to contain an ocean in a teacup. I'm not strong enough. Whitmore sat back on her heels, studying him. You're right. You're not strong enough. The blunt agreement stung worse than any criticism. Your human strength isn't enough, she continued. That's the point. You have to stop trying to control the transformation with force and start trusting the magic to guide you. The animal form isn't something you impose on yourself, it's something you allow yourself to become. I don't understand. Yes, you do. You've been doing it all year. Her voice was gentle. You stopped trying to force yourself to be mediocre and allowed yourself to be brilliant. You stopped controlling every interaction and allowed yourself to have real friends. This is the same principle, just applied to magic instead of identity. Draco closed his eyes, feeling the truth of it settle into his bones. Try again tomorrow, Whitmore said. But this time, don't fight the transformation. Surrender to it. The sixth week, something shifted. Draco stood in the center of Whitmore's office, eyes closed, breathing steady. He'd spent the morning in meditation, sinking so deep into his magical core that the boundaries between self and magic had blurred. He held the image of his human body in his mind, every detail, every imperfection, every scar and freckle. Then he held the other image, black feathers, hollow bones, wings built for speed and precision. A raven. He'd known for weeks now, though he hadn't said it aloud. The form had revealed itself gradually, inevitably, like Whitmore had promised. Intelligence, adaptability. A creature comfortable in darkness but not defined by it. A scavenger, a survivor, a bird that thrived in places others feared. It was perfect. It was him. Draco spoke the incantation, and this time, instead of forcing the magic, he let it flow. Let it reshape him. Let it transform him into what he already was. The sensation was indescribable. His bones hollowed and lightened. His arms elongated, fingers fusing and extending into primary feathers. His torso compressed, ribs restructuring to support a keeled sternum. His face pushed forward into a beak, eyes shifting to the sides of his head, vision suddenly sharp and strange and vast. And then he was standing on the floor on two taloned feet, wings folded against his sides, seeing the world from 2 feet off the ground. He was a raven. Draco spread his wings experimentally, responded perfectly, an extension of his will. He hopped forward, talons clicking on the stone floor, turned his head, taking in the room with vision that could see colors he'd never perceived as human. Magnificent, Whitmore breathed. Draco wanted to respond, but his throat produced only a harsh croak. Right. Ravens couldn't speak human language, but he could think, could understand, could feel the absolute rightness of this form. He held it for 30 seconds before the magic began to strain. Then he released it, feeling his body flow back into human shape with surprising ease. He was on his hands and knees, breathing hard, grinning like a madman. I did it. You did it, Whitmore agreed, and her voice was warm with pride. Now you just need to practice until the transformation is second nature. Another month of daily work, and you'll be able to shift as easily as breathing. Draco looked up at her, still grinning. A raven. A raven, she confirmed. Clever, adaptable, comfortable in darkness. I can't think of a more appropriate form. Neither could he. The 7th and 8th weeks were refinement. Draco practiced the transformation daily, sometimes multiple times a day, until his body learned the pattern of the magic. The strain lessened. The transformation became smoother, faster, more natural. He flew for the first time on a clear morning in late April, launching himself from the astronomy tower and feeling the wind catch his wings. The sensation was transcendent freedom distilled into physical form. He soared over the lake, dove through the forest canopy, rode thermal currents until his wings ached with the joy of it. When he finally landed back in Whitmore's office and transformed back to human, he was laughing. It's incredible, he said. I can't even describe it. You don't have to, Whitmore said, smiling. I can see it on your face. That night, Draco registered his animagus form with Macusa as required by American magical law. Director Fontaine processed the paperwork herself, raising an eyebrow when she saw the form. A raven, she said, appropriate for a horned serpent scholar. I thought so. She stamped the registration and handed him his official certificate. Congratulations, Mr. Morgan. This is advanced magic. You should be proud. He was. More than proud, was transformed in a way that went beyond the physical. He'd chosen this, worked for it, earned it through months of grueling effort and absolute honesty with himself. He was a raven, and he was free. May arrived with the weight of approaching examinations. Draco sat in the library with his friends, surrounded by stacks of books and parchment covered in notes. The OWLS were 2 weeks away, and the fourth years were in various states of panic. I'm going to fail Transfiguration, Keisha moaned, her head in her hands. I still can't get the conjuration sequence right. Yes, you can, Draco said patiently. You're overthinking it. The wand movement is a spiral, not a circle. Here, watch. He demonstrated the proper technique, conjuring a small bird that fluttered around Keisha's head before dissolving back into magic. Show off, Tommy muttered, but he was grinning. Some of us can't just wave our wands and make perfection happen. It's not perfection. It's practice. Draco pulled Tommy's arithmancy homework toward him, scanning the equations. And you're still making the same mistake with your numerical reduction. Look, you're carrying the 7 when you should be reducing it first. I hate arithmancy, Tommy said without heat. No, you don't. You hate making mistakes. There's a difference. Marcus looked up from his potions notes. Daniel, can you check my draft of peace recipe? I keep getting the proportions wrong. The syrup of hellebore needs to be added in 7 drops, not 9. And you're stirring counterclockwise when it should be clockwise after the moonstone powder. How do you remember all this? Jake asked, shaking his head. It's like you have every textbook memorized. Draco shrugged, uncomfortable with the attention. I just pay attention in class. You do more than pay attention, Sage said from across the table. She was the only one who didn't look stressed. Her notes were organized, color-coded, and comprehensive. You understand the underlying principles. That's why you can apply the knowledge instead of just regurgitating it. That's what Professor Mertz keeps saying, Draco admitted. Understanding the why makes the how easier. They studied for another 3 hours, Draco patiently explaining concepts and correcting mistakes. It felt good, this teaching. Not the superior condescension he'd used at Hogwarts, but genuine sharing of knowledge with people who appreciated it. When they finally packed up for the night, Tommy clapped him on the shoulder. You're going to ace these exams, you know that, right? We all are, Draco said. You've all been working hard. Yeah, but you're going to get top marks. I'd bet money on it. Draco didn't respond, but warmth spread through his chest. Not anxiety about being discovered or fear of standing out, just quiet pride in his own abilities. He was going to do well. He knew the material inside and out, not because he'd crammed it into his head for an exam, but because he'd genuinely learned it, understood it, made it part of himself. The WLS didn't scare him. They were just an opportunity to demonstrate what he already knew he could do. Examination week arrived with unseasonably warm weather and a palpable tension throughout the castle. The Ancient Runes exam was first. Draco sat at his assigned desk in the Great Hall, surrounded by other fourth years, and opened the examination booklet. Translate the following Old Norse protection ward and explain the theoretical principles underlying its construction. He smiled. This was the runic sequence he and Professor Whitmore had optimized in their research. He could write this essay in his sleep. His quill flew across the parchment, explaining not just the translation, but the mathematical principles of runic efficiency, the way simplified sequences could achieve greater power through precision rather than complexity. He included diagrams, showed his work, and finished with 15 minutes to spare. The practical portion was even easier. He carved a functional protection ward into a piece of slate, activated it with a precise application of magic, and watched it glow with steady silver light. The examiner, a stern-looking witch from Macusa, raised her eyebrows. Impressive, Mr. Morgan. You may go. Arithmancy was the next day. The theoretical portion covered numerical reduction, magical calculation, and the mathematical principles underlying spell construction. Draco worked through the problems methodically, showing every step of his reasoning, explaining the why behind each calculation. The practical required him to calculate the optimal wand movement for a complex charm based on the caster's magical signature and the desired effect. He'd done this kind of work with Professor Caldwell for months. The answer came easily, naturally, like solving a puzzle he'd been trained to recognize. Transfiguration was on Wednesday. The written exam covered the theory of transformation, the principles of conjuration, and the ethical considerations of human transfiguration. Draco wrote about the importance of understanding the fundamental nature of both the original and target forms, the way consciousness had to be preserved through transformation, the dangers of incomplete or imprecise work. The practical was more challenging. He had to demonstrate vanishment, transformation, and conjuration in sequence. He vanished a mouse, transformed a desk into a pig, and conjured a flock of birds that flew in perfect formation around the examination hall. Professor Whitmore, observing from the side of the room, was smiling. Defense against the dark arts was Thursday. The written portion covered dark creatures, defensive spells, and tactical theory. Draco wrote about strategic positioning, the importance of environmental awareness, the way defensive magic was as much about intelligence as power. The practical required him to defend against a series of simulated attacks: a boggart, a grindelow, and a staged ambush by 3 opponents. He handled each with calm precision, using the tactical principles Professor Hawthorne had taught him, turning his opponent's aggression against them. "Excellent work, Mr. Morgan," the examiner said. "Your tactical thinking is well beyond 4th-year level." Potions was Friday, the final exam. The written portion covered potion theory, ingredient properties, and the chemical principles underlying magical reactions. Draco explained the importance of understanding molecular interactions, the way temperature and timing affected chemical bonds, the reasons certain ingredients had to be added in specific sequences. The practical required him to brew a complex potion from memorized draft of peace. He worked with steady confidence, adding ingredients in precise amounts, stirring with exact timing, monitoring the color and consistency. When he bottled the final product, it was perfect silver blue and gently steaming. The examiner tested it with a detection spell and nodded. "Flawless, Mr. Morgan, well done." Draco left the examination hall feeling lighter than air. He'd done it, not just passed it, excelled, demonstrated mastery, shown the depth of his understanding, and he'd done it as himself. No hiding, no performance, no fear. Just brilliance, earned through genuine effort and understanding. The results arrived 2 weeks later, delivered by Owl during breakfast in the Great Hall. Draco's hands were steady as he opened the envelope, though his heart was racing. Around him, his friends were tearing into their own results with varying degrees of anxiety. He unfolded the parchment and scanned the scores. Ancient runes, outstanding garithmancy, outstanding transfiguration, outstanding defense against the dark arts, outstanding potions, outstanding charms, outstanding herbology, outstanding history of magic, outstanding care of magical creatures, outstanding 9 outstandings. Perfect scores across every subject. "Holy shit," Marcus breathed, reading over his shoulder. "Daniel, you got perfect marks." "Let me see that," Keisha demanded, snatching the parchment. Her eyes went wide. 9 outstandings. 9. That's incredible. What you get?" Tommy asked, then saw the scores and whistled. "Damn, I knew you were smart, but this is insane." Sage was smiling, her own results clutched in her hand. "Congratulations, you earned it." "What you get?" Draco asked her. 7 outstandings, 2 exceeds expectations. She didn't sound disappointed. "I'm happy with that." Around the Great Hall, other students were comparing scores, celebrating or commiserating. But Draco's table had drawn attention. Word was spreading fast that someone had achieved perfect marks. Headmaster Caldwell approached their table, his expression warm. "Mr. Morgan, might I have a word?" Draco stood, following the headmaster to a quieter corner of the hall. "I wanted to personally congratulate you," Caldwell said. "Perfect OWL scores are exceptionally rare. You're the top-performing student in your year. In fact, you've achieved the highest scores Ilvermorny has seen in over a decade." Draco's throat was tight. "Thank you, sir. Your teachers speak very highly of you. Professor Whitmore tells me your runic research is approaching NEWT level. Professor Caldwell, me sister, says your arithmetic understanding rivals her 6th years, and your animagus achievement at 14 is remarkable. I had excellent teachers. You had excellent teachers and the discipline to learn from them. Caldwell's eyes were kind. You should be proud, Daniel. This represents genuine mastery, not just test-taking ability. I am proud, Draco said, and realized it was true. I've never, I've never worked this hard for anything before, or cared this much about actually understanding instead of just performing. It shows. Caldwell clapped him on the shoulder. Enjoy your success. You've earned it. When Draco returned to his table, his friends erupted in congratulations. Tommy insisted on buying him dessert from the kitchen. Keisha hugged him so hard he couldn't breathe. Marcus started a chant of horned serpent's finest that half their house table picked up. Even students from other houses came by to offer congratulations. A Thunderbird sixth year shook his hand. A Wampus prefect told him he'd set a new standard. A Pukwudgie girl asked if he'd be willing to tutor her next year. Through it all, Draco felt something unfamiliar settling into his chest. Not the cold satisfaction of Malfoy superiority, not the anxious relief of having fooled everyone successfully. Just happiness. Pure, uncomplicated happiness at having achieved something difficult through his own genuine effort. He was brilliant, and for the first time in his life, that brilliance was celebrated instead of weaponized, shared instead of hoarded, earned instead of expected. That evening, Professor Whitmore found him in the library, ostensibly studying but really just staring at his results in quiet amazement. "Congratulations," she said, sitting across from him. "Though I'm not surprised. You've worked harder than any student I've taught in years. Thank you. For everything, the research, the animagus training," there he gestured vaguely. "The belief that I could do this. You did it yourself, Daniel. I just provided the framework," she smiled. "What will you do with all this knowledge? You have 2 more years here, and you're already working at NEW. T-level in several subjects." Draco thought about it. "Keep learning, keep researching. Maybe start working on original magical theory instead of just studying what others have discovered. That's an ambitious goal." "I know," he met her eyes. "But I'm not afraid of ambitious anymore. I'm not afraid of being brilliant or standing out or letting people see what I can do. That ferret kept me small for so long. I'm done with it." Whitmore's expression was knowing. "You've come a long way from the boy who deliberately underperformed in my class. That feels like a lifetime ago. In many ways, it was. You've transformed yourself as completely as any animagus transformation." She stood, preparing to leave. "I'm proud of you, Daniel. Not just for the scores, but for the person you've become." After she left, Draco sat alone in the library, watching the sun set through the tall windows. He thought about the frightened 14-year-old who'd fled Hogwarts with stolen gold and forged papers. The boy who'd been so terrified of being discovered that he'd hidden his abilities and performed mediocrity. That boy was gone, transformed. Not erased. Draco would never forget where he'd come from, what he'd fled, the weight of the choices he'd made. But he wasn't defined by that fear anymore. He was Daniel Morgan, brilliant scholar, loyal friend, animagus, top student in his year. He was someone who'd earned his success through genuine effort and understanding, someone who shared knowledge instead of hoarding it, someone who built real connections instead of political alliances. He was free, not just free from his father's expectations or Voldemort's war or the Malfoy name. Free to be himself, brilliant, ambitious, kind, complex, flawed, and absolutely, undeniably real. The moon was rising over the lake, silver and serene. Somewhere in the forest, a raven callid and free and perfectly at home in the darkness. Draco smiled. His first year at Ilvermorny was ending, but his real life he'd chosen, earned, and built with his own hands was just beginning, and it was going to be extraordinary. The apartment Macusa provided was on the 4th floor of a nondescript building in Manhattan's Lower East Side. Small, clean, functional, a one-bedroom with basic furniture, a kitchenette, and a window that looked out onto a fire escape and the street below. Draco stood in the center of the empty living room, his trunk at his feet. and felt the weight of 3 months of unstructured time settle over him like a heavy blanket. Director Fontaine had been apologetic when she'd explained the arrangement. Most of our students go home for the summer, obviously, but given your circumstances, we've arranged temporary housing. You'll need to check in weekly, just a brief meeting to confirm you're safe and settled. Otherwise, the summer is yours. Thank you, Draco had said, meaning it. The alternative was trying to find his own housing with limited funds and no references, or worse, risking a return to Britain that could get him killed or dragged before his father. But now, standing in this quiet apartment with the sounds of Muggle traffic filtering through the window, he felt unmoored. At Ilvermorny, his days had structure, classes, research, friends, meals in the great hall. Here there was just time, empty, shapeless time. He unpacked methodically, putting his clothes in the small dresser, his books on the shelf by the window, his wand in the drawer of the bedside table. The apartment came with basic kitchen supplies, linens, a small television he had no idea how to operate. When everything was put away, it was only 2 in the afternoon. Draco sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall. What did people do with summer vacation? His friends had talked about Itami was going to visit family in Arizona. Keisha was doing an internship at a magical creature sanctuary. Marcus was taking a summer course in advanced charms. Sage had invited him to visit her family's reservation in Montana, but Draco had declined, too uncertain about meeting parents, answering questions, maintaining his cover in close quarters. He could study. He had books, research notes from his work with Professor Whitmore. But the thought of spending 3 months alone in this apartment, reading in silence, felt suffocating. He needed something, movement, purpose, something to fill the hours that didn't involve sitting still with his thoughts. That evening, Draco went for a walk. The neighborhood was busy, muggles everywhere, walking dogs, pushing strollers, carrying groceries. He passed restaurants with unfamiliar smells, bodegas with produce stacked outside, a laundromat where the sound of industrial dryers rumbled through the open door. And then he saw it. The gym was tucked between a Chinese takeout place and a pawn shop, its windows covered with faded posters advertising classes. Ramirez's boxing, kickboxing. Through the glass, Draco could see heavy bags hanging from the ceiling, a boxing ring in the corner, people in athletic clothes hitting pads with focused intensity. He stopped, watching. A man threw a combination jab, cross, Hookie's whole body rotating with the punches. The sound of gloved fists hitting leather was sharp, rhythmic, visceral. Another person was kicking a heavy bag, their shin connecting with a solid thwack that Draco felt in his chest. It was pure physicality. No wands, no incantations, no magic. Just bodies and technique and sweat. Draco pushed open the door. The gym smelled like leather and sweat and cleaning solution. The floor was scuffed, the equipment well used but maintained. A woman at the front desk looked up as he entered, middle-aged, muscular, with short dark hair and sharp eyes. "Help you?" Draco hesitated. "I saw the sign. For classes. You done kickboxing before?" "No." She studied him, skinny, pale, clearly out of his element. "We got a beginner class Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays at 6 p.m., $20 per class, or you can buy a monthly membership for $150. Includes access to the gym outside class hours." Draco did the math. He had enough money, carefully budgeted from what remained of his stolen gold. "I'll take the monthly membership." "You sure? Most people try a class first." "I'm sure," she shrugged, pulling out a form. "Fill this out. Name, emergency contact, medical conditions. You'll need hand wraps and gloves. You can rent them for $5 or buy your own. I recommend buying if you're doing the membership." 20 minutes later, Draco walked out with a membership card, a pair of hand wraps, and used gloves the woman coach Ramaj had sold him at a discount. His first class was in 2 days. He had no idea what he was doing. But for the first time since arriving at the apartment, he felt something other than untethered. The first class was humbling. Draco arrived early, changed into the athletic clothes he'd bought at a Muggle sporting goods store, and wrapped his hands the way Coach Ramirez had shown him. The other students filtered in a mix of ages and body types, some clearly experienced, others as new as he was. "All right, everyone, let's warm up," Coach Ramirez called. 3 laps around the gym, then jumping jacks, push-ups, and sit-ups. "Let's go," Draco ran. His lungs burned after the first lap. By the third, he was gasping, his legs shaking. The jumping jacks were manageable. The push-ups were torture. His arms gave out after 12, and he had to finish on his knees. The sit-ups made his abdomen cramp. He was in terrible shape. "Good effort," Coach Ramirez said, not unkindly. "You'll build stamina. Now let's work on stance." She demonstrated the basic kickboxing stance, of feet shoulder width apart, dominant foot back, knees slightly bent, hands up protecting the face. Draco mimicked her, feeling awkward and unbalanced. "Rotate your hips when you punch," she said, moving through the class to adjust people's form. When she got to Draco, she tapped his back foot. "You're too flat. Stay on the balls of your feet. You need to be able to move." He adjusted. It felt unnatural, like he might tip over. "Better. Now jab." She showed them the jab, a quick, straight punch with the lead hand, snapping back immediately to guard position. Draco threw one. It felt weak, ineffective. "Again, faster, snap it." He tried again, and again, and again, until his shoulder ached and his arm felt like lead. They moved through basic punches: jab, cross, hook, uppercut. Then kicks: front kick, roundhouse, side kick. Each technique required precise body mechanics, weight transfer, hip rotation. It was like learning a new language, except with his entire body. By the end of the hour, Draco was drenched in sweat, his muscles trembling, his hands sore despite the gloves. "Good work, everyone," Coach Ramirez said. "Stretch it out, hydrate, and I'll see you next class." Draco peeled off his gloves and unwrapped his hands. His knuckles were red, his shoulders burning. He felt like he'd been hit by a bludger. He also felt more alive than he had in weeks. He went back on Wednesday and Friday and the following Monday. The classes were brutal. Coach Ramirez pushed them hard: cardio drills, technique work, partner drills with focus mitts, rounds on the heavy bag. Draco's body ached constantly. His shins were bruised from kicking. His knuckles were perpetually sore. But he kept going. There was something meditative about it. The repetition of techniques, the focus required to execute them correctly, the way his mind had to quiet to let his body learn. When he was throwing combinations on the heavy bag, there was no room for anxiety about his identity, no space for guilt about his mother, no fear of being discovered. There was just the bag, the rhythm of his breathing, the snap of his punches. Jab, cross, hook, front kick, roundhouse, again, again, again. His body began to change. The cardio got easier. His punches got faster, sharper. His kicks started landing with real power. Coach Ramirez noticed. "You're a quick learner," she said one evening, watching him work the heavy bag. "You've got good discipline. Most beginners get sloppy when they're tired, but you stay technical." "Thank you. You train in anything else? Martial arts, boxing?" "No, this is my first time." She raised an eyebrow. "Could have fooled me. You move like someone who's used to precision work." Draco thought about wand movements, the exact angles required for complex spells, the way dueling required split-second timing and spatial awareness. "I guess I am." After class, he started staying late to work the bags on his own. The gym was open until 10, and most nights he was one of the last to leave. He drilled techniques until his form broke down, then rest and drill again. He'd visualize combinations, practice footwork, work on his weakest areas. It was training, but it was also therapy. Every punch carried the weight of his father's expectations. Every kick released the fear of being discovered. Every round on the bag was a conversation with the part of himself that had run away, that had chosen freedom over family, that had burned every bridge to save his own soul. The physical exhaustion quieted his mind in a way meditation never had. When he finally stumbled back to his apartment, muscles screaming, he'd shower and collapse into bed and sleep without dreams. It was exactly what he needed. The letter arrived on a Tuesday in mid-July. Draco had just returned from an early morning training session, started going to the gym twice a day, morning and evening, filling his hours with physical work. He was unlocking his apartment door when he saw it. A cream-colored envelope on the floor just inside, sealed with green wax. The Malfoy family crest. His heart stopped. He picked it up with shaking hands, carried it to the small kitchen table, and stared at it for a full minute before breaking the seal. The handwriting was his mother's elegant, precise, achingly familiar. My dearest Draco, I don't know if this letter will reach you. I don't know where you are, or if you're safe, or if you ever want to hear from me again. But I have to try. I've left your father. Draco's breath caught. I should have done it years ago. I should have protected you from him, from his choices, from the darkness he brought into our home. I failed you, my darling boy. I failed you in every way a mother can fail her child. I discovered evidence of his infidelity, multiple affairs, conducted with the same cold calculation he applies to everything. But worse than that, I found correspondence with the Dark Lord's followers. Plans, strategies. Your father has been preparing for the Dark Lord's return, positioning himself to be among the first to rejoin his service. And I realized this is why you left. This is why you disappeared without a word, without a trace. You saw what was coming. You saw what your father would demand of you, what he would force you to become. And you were brave enough to run. I wasn't brave enough to run with you. I wasn't brave enough to protect you from him while you were still here. That guilt will haunt me for the rest of my life. I've filed for divorce. I'm reclaiming my maiden name back. I've moved out of the manor and taken residence in a property my family left me. Your father is furious, of course. He's threatened me, tried to manipulate me, used every tool in his arsenal to force me back. But I'm done being his possession. I'm done being complicit in his darkness. Draco, wherever you are, I hope you're safe. I hope you found somewhere that lets you be yourself, free from his shadow. I hope you know that I love you, that I've always loved you, even when I was too weak to show it properly. If you ever want to contact me, I'll be waiting. But I understand if you don't. I understand if you need to stay hidden, stay safe, stay far away from the wreckage of our family. Just know that I'm proud of you, proud of your courage, proud that you chose freedom over the path your father laid out for you. I love you, my darling boy, always. Your mother, Narcissa Black Draco, read the letter 3 times, his hands shaking harder with each pass. His mother had left. His mother had left. She divorced Lucius, reclaimed her maiden name, escaped the manor and his father's control. She'd done what Draco had never thought she was capable of doing, and she thought it was her fault that Draco had disappeared. She blamed herself for not protecting him, for not being brave enough to leave sooner. She didn't know he was safe. Didn't know he was in America, enrolled in school, thriving. She thought he was out there somewhere, alone and frightened, hiding from his father's reach. Draco's chest felt like it was caving in. He wanted to write back. Wanted to tell her he was alive, he was safe, he was happy. Wanted to tell her about Ilvermorny, about his friends, about becoming an animagus and acing his OWLS, and finally being free to be brilliant without apology. But he couldn't. If he contacted her, there was a risk. Owls could be traced. Letters could be intercepted. If his father discovered where Draco was, if the Death Eaters found out he'd fled to America, he couldn't risk it. Not yet. Not while Voldemort was still gathering power, while his father was still positioning himself for the Dark Lord's return. Draco folded the letter carefully and sat at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. His mother was free, but she was grieving, thinking her son was lost to her. And Draco couldn't tell her otherwise. He went to Macusa the next morning. Director Fontaine's office was in the same building where he'd first been questioned, hidden inside the Woolworth building's magical floors. The receptionist recognized him and waved him through. Fontaine looked up when he entered, her expression shifting from professional to concerned when she saw his face. "Mr. Morgan, I wasn't expecting you until your weekly check-in on Friday. I need to ask you something." Draco's voice was rough. He hadn't slept. About contacting someone in Britain. She gestured to the chair across from her desk. Sit. Tell me what's happened. He handed her the letter. Fontaine read it slowly, her expression carefully neutral. When she finished, she set it down and looked at him with something like sympathy. Your mother. She doesn't know I'm safe. She thinks I'm out there somewhere, hiding, alone. She blames herself for not protecting me from my father. Draco's hands were clenched in his lap. I want to write to her, tell her I'm all right. But I don't know if it's safe. Fontaine was quiet for a long moment. The honest answer is that any contact with Britain carries risk, she said finally. Owl Post can be traced, especially if your father is monitoring your mother's correspondence. If he discovers you're in America, if he passes that information to Voldemort's followers. I know, Draco's throat was tight. I know it's dangerous, but she's grieving. She thinks I'm lost, and it's because of her, and I can't let her think that. I understand. Fontaine's voice was gentle. There are ways to send correspondence that are more secure than standard Owl Post. Macusa has channels for communicating with British contacts that are harder to trace. We could send a letter on your behalf through our official channels with protections in place. Would it be safe? Safer than a direct owl. Not perfectly safe, nothing is, in the current climate. But the risk would be significantly reduced. Draco closed his eyes. What would you recommend? I would recommend waiting, Fontaine said quietly. I know that's not what you want to hear, but your mother has just left your father. He'll be watching her closely, monitoring her contacts, looking for leverage to force her back. If you contact her now, even through secure channels, there's a chance he could discover it. So I just let her suffer, let her think I'm gone. I'm not saying don't contact her ever. I'm saying wait until the situation stabilizes. Give it a few months. Let your father's attention shift elsewhere. Then we can arrange secure communication that's less likely to be intercepted. Draco wanted to argue. Wanted to insist that his mother deserved to know that she'd suffered enough, that keeping her in the dark was cruel. But he knew Fontaine was right. If his father discovered where he was, it wouldn't just endanger Draco. It would endanger his mother, who just escaped Lucius's control. It would endanger everyone at Ilvermorny who protected him. It would destroy everything he'd built. How long? He asked. How long should I wait? Until the end of summer at minimum. Possibly longer, depending on how the situation in Britain develops. Fontaine's expression was sympathetic. I know this is difficult, but your safety and your mother's has to come first. Draco nodded, not trusting himself to speak. In the meantime, Fontaine continued, I'll monitor the situation. If we receive intelligence that suggests it's safe to make contact, I'll let you know immediately. And when the time comes, we'll help you craft a letter that's secure and untraceable. Thank you. Is there anything else you need? Support, counseling, someone to talk to? Draco shook his head. I need to process this. Take all the time you need. And remember, you can contact me anytime, not just for your weekly check-ins. If you need to talk, my door is open. Draco left Macusa feeling hollowed out. His mother was free, but she was in pain, and he couldn't ease it. He was safe. But that safety came at the cost of her peace of mind. There was no good answer, no choice that didn't hurt. That evening, Draco went to the gym and hit the heavy bag until his hands bled through his wraps. Coach Ramirez found him 20 minutes into his session, his punches getting sloppy, his breathing ragged. Hey! Hey, stop. She grabbed the bag, steadying it. What's going on? Nothing, I'm fine. You're not fine, you're going to break your hands. She pulled off his gloves, unwrapped his hands. His knuckles were split, blood seeping through the fabric. Jesus, kid. What happened? Draco stared at his hands. Family stuff. Family stuff that makes you want to punch through a bag. Something like that. Coach Ramirez sighed. She grabbed the first aid kit from the office, came back, and started cleaning his knuckles with antiseptic. Draco hissed at the sting. You know what I tell my fighters, she said, wrapping his hands with gauze. Pain you can't control, you gotta find a way to channel it, but you channel it smart. You don't destroy yourself in the process. I wasn't trying to destroy myself. No. Because that's what it looked like. She finished wrapping his left hand, started on his right. You've been training hard all summer. I respect that. But there's a difference between pushing yourself and punishing yourself. You need to know which one you're doing. Draco was quiet. Whatever's going on with your family, Coach Ramirez said, it's not going to get solved by breaking your hands. You want to hit something, hit it with technique, control, precision. That's how you turn pain into power. She finished wrapping his hand and stood. Take tomorrow off. Let your hands heal. Come back Friday with your head on straight. Okay. And kid, if you need to talk to someone actually talk, there are people who can help with that. I'm not a therapist, but I know some good ones. I'll be fine. Yeah. You keep saying that. She clapped him on the shoulder. Friday, don't make me regret giving you that membership. After she left, Draco sat on the edge of the boxing ring, staring at his wrapped hands. Control, precision, technique. He'd spent his whole life learning controlling his magic, his emotions, his performance of the perfect Malfoy heir. He'd thought he'd left that behind when he became Daniel Morgan. But maybe control wasn't the enemy. Maybe it was the tool. He couldn't control his father's choices. Couldn't control Voldemort's return or the war that was coming. Couldn't control his mother's grief or the danger that surrounded any contact with her. But he could control himself. His training, his discipline, his response to the pain. He could choose how to channel it. Draco stood, flexing his bandaged hands. They hurt, but the pain was clean, honest. A reminder that he was alive, that he was here, that he'd survived. His mother was free. That was what mattered. And when it was safe, when Fontaine gave him the signal, tell her he was free too. Until then, he'd train. He'd build strength. He'd turn the pain into something useful. He'd survive this the way he'd survived everything else, one punch at a time. The rest of the summer passed in a rhythm of sweat and silence. Draco trained 6 days a week, sometimes twice a day. His body transformedly in muscle replacing softness, his reflexes sharpening, his stamina building, until he could go 3 full rounds on the heavy bag without his form breaking down. Coach Ramirez started teaching him more advanced combinations, defensive techniques, footwork drills. She paired him with more experienced students for sparring, and Draco learned to read opponents, to slip punches, to counter with precision. He was good at it, better than good. You've got natural talent, Coach Ramirez told him after a particularly clean sparring session. You ever think about competing? No, Draco said. The idea of standing in a ring with an audience, being watched, being noticed, it made his skin crawl. I just like the training. Fair enough. Not everyone needs to fight in front of a crowd to be a fighter. At night, alone in his apartment, Draco read his mother's letter over and over. He drafted responses he'd never send, imagining what he'd say when the time came. I'm safe. I'm in America. I'm in school. I'm happy. I don't blame you. I never blamed you. I'm proud of you for leaving him. I love you too. But the letters stayed unwritten, unsent, waiting for the day when it would be safe. In early August, Draco received his course schedule for his second year at Ilvermorny. Advanced Ancient Runes, Advanced Arithmancy, NEW. T-Level Transfiguration, Independent Study in Magical Theory with Professor Whitmore. He stared at the parchment and felt something settle in his chest. Purpose, direction, a future that was his own. The summer had been hard, lonely, full of complicated grief and impossible choices. But he'd survived it. He built strength, physical and mental. He'd learned to channel pain into discipline. He'd made the hard choice to protect his mother by staying silent, even though it hurt. And in 2 weeks, he'd go back to Ilvermorny. Back to his friends, his studies, his life as Daniel Morgan. Back to the freedom he'd fought so hard to claim. Draco folded the course schedule carefully and set it on his desk next to his mother's letter. 2 pieces of paper. 2 parts of his life, the one he'd left behind and the one he was building. He couldn't have both. Not yet, maybe not ever. But he could honor them both. Could carry the weight of his choices with grace and strength. Could be the person his mother hoped he'd become, brave enough to choose freedom, strong enough to survive it. The summer sun was setting over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Somewhere in Britain, his mother was watching the same sun set, grieving a son she thought was lost. Someday he'd tell her the truth, someday when it was safe. Until then, he'd keep training, keep learning, keep building the life he'd chosen, one day at a time, one punch at a time, free. The summons from Director Fontaine arrived on a Thursday morning in late August, 2 weeks before Draco was scheduled to return to Ilvermorny. He just returned from his morning training session, muscles pleasantly sore, when he found the official Macusa owl waiting on his fire escape. His heart-lurched official correspondence always made him nervous, even now. But when he unfolded the parchment, it was brief and professional. Please report to my office at your earliest convenience. Director Fontaine, no urgency, no alarm, just a request. Draco showered quickly, changed into clean clothes, and apparated to the Woolworth building. Director Fontaine's office looked the same as it had in Julianat, professional, with the American flag and Macusa's seal on the wall behind her desk. She looked up when he entered, her expression carefully neutral. "Mr. Morgan, thank you for coming so quickly." "Of course." Draco sat in the chair across from her desk, trying to read her face. "Is something wrong?" "No, actually, quite the opposite." She folded her hands on the desk. "I wanted to update you on the situation in Britain, specifically regarding your mother." Draco's breath caught. "We've been monitoring Lucius Malfoy's movements since your mother filed for divorce," Fontaine continued. "The British ministry has also been tracking him as a known Death Eater sympathizer, and with Voldemort's return imminent, they're watching anyone with suspected ties to his organization. And your mother's legal separation has been finalized. The divorce is complete. She's reclaimed her maiden name and has taken residence in a property separate from Malfoy Manor. More importantly, our intelligence suggests that Lucius has no idea where you are. He's been searching, but his inquiries have led nowhere." Draco's hands were shaking. He gripped the armrests to steady them. "What does that mean?" Fontaine's expression softened. "It means it's safe for you to contact her. The risk of exposing your location is minimalicious, is being monitored by both Macusa and the ministry, and any attempt to trace correspondence to your mother would be detected. We have secure channels that can't be intercepted. You're saying I can write to her. I'm saying you can do more than that." Fontaine pulled a folder from her desk drawer. "Your mother has been in contact with the British ministry regarding her divorce settlement. She has significant financial resource enough to relocate if she chose to. If you wanted to invite her to America, we could facilitate that. A meeting, or even permanent residency, if that's what you both wanted." Draco couldn't breathe. "She could come here, if she wants to." "If you want her to." Fontaine's voice was gentle. "I know you've been carrying the weight of her grief all summer. You don't have to carry it anymore. You can tell her you're safe. You can see her if you want." The tears came before Draco could stop them. He pressed his hands to his face, shoulders shaking. "I'm sorry," he managed. "I just don't apologize." Fontaine stood, came around the desk, and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You've been incredibly brave, Mr. Morgan. You made the hard choice to protect her by staying silent. But you don't have to make that choice anymore." Draco nodded, unable to speak. "Take some time," Fontaine said quietly. "Think about what you want to say to her. When you're ready, we'll help you draft a letter through our secure channels. And if she wants to come to America, we'll arrange it." "Thank you," Draco whispered. "You're welcome." Draco spent the rest of the day in his apartment, staring at a blank piece of parchment. "What did you say to your mother after a year of silence?" "After letting her believe you were lost, possibly dead, while you built a new life an ocean away. I'm sorry felt inadequate. I'm safe felt insufficient. I love you felt too small for the enormity of what he needed to convey." Finally, as the sun set over Manhattan, he began to write. "Mother, I don't know how to begin this letter except to say, I'm alive, I'm safe, I'm in America. I know you've been grieving. I know you blamed yourself for my disappearance. I need you to know none of this was your fault. You didn't fail me. You loved me the best way you knew how, and that love is what gave me the courage to run. I left because I saw what was coming. I saw Father's plans, the Dark Lord's return, the path I was expected to walk. I couldn't do it. I couldn't become what he wanted me to be, so I ran. I've been in America since I left home. I'm enrolled in school. I have friends. I'm safe and I'm happy, happier than I've ever been. I wanted to tell you sooner. I've wanted to tell you every day since I received your letter. But it wasn't safe, not for you, not for me. Director Fontaine at Macusa has been monitoring the situation, and she's told me it's safe now. Father is being watched. He can't trace this letter. He can't find me. If you want to see me, I can arrange it. Macusa can bring you here safely. We could meet. We could talk. Really talk without Father's shadow between us. I know I hurt you by leaving. I know the past year has been unbearable, but I need you to know I'm not lost. I'm not the frightened boy who disappeared from Hogwarts. I'm free. And if you want to be free too, there's a place for you here. I love you, Mother. I've always loved you. Your son, Draco, he read it 3 times, then sealed it and took it to Macusa. Narcissa's response arrived the next morning. Draco's hands shook as he broke the seal. Macusa's secure channels had delivered it overnight, faster than any owl could fly. My darling boy, I've read your letter a dozen times, and I still can't believe it's real. You're alive, you're safe, you're happy. I've spent the past year in agony, imagining the worst. I thought you were hiding somewhere, alone and frightened. I thought you were running from Death Eaters, from your father's allies, from the darkness that's consuming Britain. I thought I'd lost you forever, but you weren't lost. You were building a life. You were becoming the person you were always meant to be. I'm so proud of you, Draco. So impossibly proud. Yes, yes, I want to see you. I want to meet you in America. I want to see this new life you've built, this freedom you've claimed. I want to know the person you've become. I've finalized my divorce from your father. I have resources, significant resources from the settlement. I can travel. I can relocate if that's what you want. If there's room in your new life for your mother, tell me when and where. I'll be there. I love you more than words can express. Mother Draco sat on the floor of his apartment and cried until he had no tears left. Macusa arranged everything. Narcissa would travel via international portkey to Macusa headquarters in New York. She'd been approved for a temporary visa with the option to apply for permanent residency. Director Fontaine would meet her personally and escort her to a private room where Draco would be waiting. The date was set for the following Tuesday. Draco barely slept the night before. He changed clothes 3 times, unable to decide what to wear. Did he dress as Daniel Morgan, the Ilvermorny student, or as some version of Draco Malfoy, the son she remembered? In the end, he chose simple clothes-stock jeans, a grey shirt, his leather jacket. Somewhere between both identities. Honest. He arrived at Macusa an hour early. Director Fontaine found him pacing in the hallway outside the private meeting room. "She'll be here in 10 minutes, Fontaine said gently. "Are you ready?" "I don't know." Draco's voice was rough. "What if she doesn't recognize me? What if I'm not? What if I'm too different? Then you'll be different together." Fontaine squeezed his shoulder. "She's not the same person she was a year ago either. You've both changed. That's not a bad thing." Draco nodded, not trusting himself to speak. "I'll bring her to you," Fontaine said. "Take all the time you need." She left, and Draco was alone. The room was simply a table, 2 chairs, a window overlooking the magical New York skyline, neutral territory, a place for new beginnings. Draco stood by the window, watching the enchanted traffic below, and tried to breathe. Then the door opened. Narcissa Black looked exactly the same and completely different. She was still elegant, perfectly tailored robes in deep blue, her blonde hair swept back in a simple style, her posture impeccable. But there was something new in her bearing. A straightness to her spine that wasn't about pure blood deportment, a lightness in her expression that Draco had never seen before. She looked free. Their eyes met across the room. For a moment, neither of them moved. They just stared at each other, taking in the changes, the year of separation, the impossible reality of being in the same room again. Then Narcissa's composure shattered. "Draco," she whispered. He crossed the room in 3 strides, and she met him halfway, pulling him into her arms with a fierceness that stole his breath. She was shaking, or maybe he was shaking, or maybe they both were. "You're here," she said against his hair. "You're real, you're alive." "I'm here." Draco's voice broke. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I left you. Don't." She pulled back, cupping his face in her hands. Her eyes were wet. "Don't apologize for saving yourself. Don't apologize for being brave enough to run. But you didn't know. I know now." She smoothed his dark hair back from his forehead, her expression tender and aching. "Look at you. You've grown. You're taller, and your hair. I had to change it. To hide. It suits you." She smiled through her tears. "You look like yourself, not like a Malfoy, like Draco." They stood there for a long moment, just looking at each other. Draco catalogued the small changes in her face, the lines around her eyes a little deeper, but softer somehow. The tension she'd always carried in her jaw gone. "You look different too," he said quietly. "You look happy." "I am." Narcissa's smile was real, genuine. "For the first time in 20 years, I'm happy. I left him, Draco. I left the manor, the name, all of it. I'm free." "I know." "I got your letter, and I got yours." She touched his cheek. "You're in school, you have friends, you're thriving." "I am." Draco's throat was tight. "I'm at Ilvermorny. I'm studying ancient runes and arithmancy and transfiguration. I have a friend group. I'm top of my year. I'm actually happy, Mother. For the first time in my life, I'm genuinely happy." Narcissa's eyes filled with fresh tears. "That's all I ever wanted for you, to be free to be yourself, to be brilliant without apology, to have real friends who valued you for who you are, not what you could do for them. I have that now. I'm so glad." She pulled him close again, holding him like she'd never let go. "I'm so impossibly glad." They moved to the chairs by the window and talked for hours. Draco told her about Ilvermorny, about being sorted into Horned Serpent, about his friends Sage and Marcus and Tommy and Keisha, about his professors who recognized his abilities and encouraged him to excel, about becoming an animagus, about his perfect OWL scores, about the research he was doing with Professor Whitmore. He told her about Macusa discovering his identity and granting him asylum, about Director Fontaine and Aura James choosing to protect him rather than deport him, about living as Daniel Morgan, about the freedom of being someone new. He even told her about the kickboxing gym, about Coach Ramirez, about learning to channel his fear and pain into physical discipline. Narcissa listened to all of it with fierce attention, asking questions, celebrating his achievements, marveling at the life he'd built. "You've done so well," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You've built something real, something yours." "What about you?" Draco asked. "Your letter said you found evidence of Father's affairs and his Death Eater activities." Narcissa's expression hardened. "I found correspondence. Letters to known Death Eaters, plans for Voldemort's return, strategies for recruiting new followers, and evidence of multiple affairs, calculated, cold, transactional relationships designed to expand his political influence." "I'm sorry. Don't be." "It gave me the leverage I needed to leave." She met his eyes. "I threatened to expose everything to the ministry if he contested the divorce. He had no choice but to agree to my terms. I took a substantial settlement enough to live independently for the rest of my life. And I reclaimed my maiden name. I'm Narcissa Black again." "Not for long," Draco said quietly. She raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "If you stay in America, you'll need a new identity, like I did. Macusa can help with that. They have channels for creating documentation, establishing legal residency." Narcissa was quiet for a moment, considering. "A new name, a new life, if you want it." "What name did you choose?" "Daniel Morgan." "Daniel, because it means God is my judge, and I want it to be judged by my choices, not my blood. Morgan, because it's Welsh, like my mother's family, and it means sea-born, reborn from the crossing." Narcissa smiled. "That's beautiful." and very clever. What would you choose? She thought for a long moment, her gaze distant. Nadia, she said finally. It's close enough to Narcissa that I'd respond to it naturally, but it's Russian from my black family heritage. It means hope. Nadia, Draco repeated. I like it. Nadia Morgan. She tested the name, rolling it on her tongue. Yes, that feels right. A new name for a new life. You're really staying. If you'll have me. Narcissa reached across the table and took his hand. I don't want to intrude on the life you've built. But if there's room for Maeve you want me like to stay, I'd like to build a life in America. A real life, not the performance I had in Britain. I want you here, Draco said, his voice fierce. I've wanted you here since the day I left. I just couldn't risk it before. And now it's safe. Now we can both be free. Narcissa squeezed his hand. Then I'm staying. Within a week, Narcissano, legally Nadia Morgan, thanks to Macusa's documentation, Service had purchased a property in rural Connecticut. The mansion was sprawling, but not ostentatious. 3 stories of elegant stone and timber, set on 20 acres of wooded land with a private lake. It had the classical proportions of European architecture, but the comfortable, open layout of American design. Large windows let in natural light. The rooms were spacious but warm. It was nothing like Malfoy Manor. Draco helped her move in, using magic to arrange furniture and unpack boxes. Narcissa had brought surprisingly little from Britain, mostly books, a few pieces of jewelry, some personal items. Everything else she'd left behind. I don't want reminders, she said, directing a stack of books to float onto the library shelves. I want to start fresh. The mansion had a master suite for Narcissa, several guest rooms, a library, a study, a conservatory, and a large kitchen that opened onto a terrace overlooking the lake. There was even a separate wing with its own entrance effect for Draco when he was home from school. This is yours, Narcissa said, showing him the suite. Your room, your bathroom, your study space. I want you to have a real home to come back to. Not just a place to visit. Draco stood in the center of the room larger than his Ilvermorny dorm, with a window seat overlooking the lake and built-in bookshelves along one wall, and felt something settle in his chest. Home. He had a home. Thank you, he said quietly. Narcissa smiled. Thank you for letting me be part of your life, for giving me a second chance. You don't need a second chance. You were always, Draco's voice caught. You were always the one good thing about my old life. The one person who loved me, even when I didn't deserve it. You always deserved it. Narcissa crossed the room and pulled him into a hug. You were a child, Draco. You deserved love and protection and the freedom to be yourself. I'm sorry I couldn't give you that before. You're giving it to me now. Yes, she pulled back, meeting his eyes. And I'm not going to waste this chance. I'm going to be the mother you deserved all along, not the one who was too afraid to stand up to your father. The one who chooses you every single time. Draco hugged her tighter, unable to speak. They spent the last week of summer settling into the new house together. Narcissa enrolled in a Muggle cooking class, something she'd never been allowed to do as a Malfoy wife, and experimented with recipes in the large kitchen. Some were disasters. Some were surprisingly good. Draco helped, learning alongside her, and they laughed at their mistakes in a way that felt impossibly light. They walked the property together, exploring the woods and the lake. Narcissa talked about possibly starting a garden, about learning to paint, about all the things she'd never had time for when she was performing the role of pure-blood wife. Draco told her about his plans for second year at Ilvermorny, advanced courses he'd be taking, the independent research he wanted to pursue, his friends and professors. Will you tell them about me? Narcissa asked one evening as they sat on the terrace watching the sunset over the lake. My friends. Yes, will you tell them your mother is here, that Nadia Morgan is? Me, Draco considered. I'll tell them I have family in America now, that my mother escaped a bad situation in Britain and came here to start over. They don't need to know the details. Thea used to me being private about my past. And your professors, Macusa, they already know. Director Fontaine helped arrange your immigration. Headmaster Caldwell knows my real identity. They'll protect your secret the same way they protect mine. Narcissa nodded, satisfied. Good. I don't want to complicate your life. I just want to be part of it. You're not complicating anything. Draco reached over and took her hand. You're making it better. For the first time, I have real family. Someone who chose to be here, not because of blood or duty, but because they wanted to. I did choose this, Narcissa said softly. I chose you. I chose freedom. I chose to be Nadia Morgan instead of Narcissa Malfoy. And I don't regret it for a second. Neither do I. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to deep purple. Somewhere in the woods, an owl called. The lake reflected the first stars. What do you think Father is doing right now? Draco asked quietly. Narcissa's expression hardened. Plotting, scheming, preparing for the Dark Lord's return, exactly what he's always done. Do you think he's looking for me? Probably, but he won't find you. Macusa has made sure of that, and even if he did, she squeezed Draco's hand. He has no power over you anymore. You're not his son. You're not his heir. You're Daniel Morgan, brilliant student, free person, someone who chose his own path. And you're not his wife. No, I'm Nadia Morgan, independent woman, free person, someone who chose her own path, she smiled. We're both reborn, darling, both free, and we're going to build something beautiful here. We already are, Draco said. The night before Draco was scheduled to return to Ilvermorny, Narcissa made dinner a proper meal, roasted chicken and vegetables and fresh bread from the Muggle bakery in town. They ate on the terrace, the late summer air warm and gentle. Are you nervous? Narcissa asked. About going back. A little. It'll be strange having a home to come back to. Last year I just stayed at school for the holidays. I didn't have anywhere else to go. You have somewhere now. Narcissa's voice was firm. You have a home, you have family. And I'll be here whenever you need me. What will you do while I'm at school? Live, she smiled. I'm going to take my cooking classes. I'm going to learn to paint. I'm going to read all the books I never had time for. I'm going to make friends, real friends, not political connections. I'm going to figure out who Nadia Morgan is when she's not performing for anyone. That sounds perfect. It does, doesn't it? Narcissa looked out over the lake, her expression peaceful. For the first time in my life, I get to just be, no expectations, no performance, no fear. Just me figuring out what I want. I'm proud of you, Draco said quietly. She turned to him, surprised. You're proud of me? Yes, you left everything. You walked away from the only life you'd ever known. You chose freedom over security, truth over performance. That takes incredible courage. Narcissa's eyes filled with tears. I learned it from you. You were brave enough to run first. You showed me it was possible. We saved each other then. Yes, she reached across the table and took his hand. We did. They finished dinner as the stars came out, talking about everything and nothing. Draco told her about his animagus formed raven and she marveled at the symbolism. She told him about the Muggle neighbors she'd met, about the woman down the road who'd invited her to a book club. It was ordinary, comfortable, real. Everything Draco had never had growing up, everything he'd been searching for. The next morning, Narcissa drove him to the Portkey station in New, been taking Muggle driving lessons, and was absurdly proud of her new skill. They said goodbye in the parking lot, both of them trying not to cry. Write to me, Narcissa said, hugging him tight. Tell me about your classes, your friends, everything. I want to know about your life. I will, and you write to me too. Tell me about your cooking disasters and your painting attempts and your book club, she laughed. I promise. I'll be home for Thanksgiving. Macusa said Ilvermorny has a week-long break. I'll make dinner, or attempt to make dinner. We'll see how the cooking classes go. Draco pulled back, meeting her eyes. Thank you for coming here, for choosing this, for choosing me. Always, Narcissa said fiercely. I will always choose you. You're my son, and I love you more than anything in this world. I love you too. They hugged one more time, and then Draco picked up his trunk and headed for the portkey that would take him back to Ilvermorny. As he glanced back, he saw Narcissa standing by her car, watching him with a smile that was equal parts proud and bittersweet. She waved. He waved back. And then the portkey activated, and he was gone. When Draco arrived back at Ilvermorny, Marcus was already in their dorm room, unpacking. "Daniel, you're back," Marcus grinned. "How was your summer? You look different. Did you get taller?" "Maybe a little." Draco set his trunk down, smiling. "I took up kickboxing, probably built some muscle." "Kickboxing? That's so cool. You'll have to tell me about it." Marcus paused. "Hey, you seem, I don't know, lighter, happier." Draco thought about the mansion in Connecticut, about Narcissa learning to cook and paint and be herself, about having a real home to return to, a real family who chose him. "Yeah," he said quietly, "I am happier. My mother came to America. She left my father and started over here. I have family now, a real home." Marcus's expression softened. "That's amazing, man. I'm really happy for you." "Thanks. So, second year, ready to keep being the smartest person in our year," Draco laughed. "I'll do my best." As he unpacked his things, putting books on shelves and clothes in drawers, he felt the familiar comfort of Ilvermorny settling around him. This was his school, his house, his life. But now, for the first time, he also had a home beyond these walls, a mother who loved him. A future that was entirely his own. He was Draco Malfoy and Daniel Morgan. He was a son and a student and a friend and a raven. He was brilliant and kind and complex and free. And he was, finally, impossibly, home, in every sense of the word. Chapter 10. The dormitory bathroom was empty when Draco locked the door behind him. Classes didn't start for another 2 days, and most students were still settling in, unpacking trunks and catching up with friends after the summer break. Draco set the box of hair dye on the counter and stared at his reflection. His hair had grown out over the summer's dark brown. He dyed it when he first arrived in America, now showed platinum blonde roots. He'd kept it brown for a year, a necessary disguise, a way to blend in and disappear. But he was done disappearing. He opened the box electric blue, vibrant and impossible to miss and read the instructions. The process was simple enough. He'd done this before, after all, though that first time had been about hiding. This was different. This was about being seen. Draco worked methodically, sectioning his hair, applying the dye from root to tip. The chemical smell filled the small bathroom, sharp and astringent. He set a timer and sat on the edge of the bathtub, waiting. 25 minutes later, he rinsed the dye out and dried his hair with a towel. The face in the mirror was striking. Electric blue hair, bright against his pale skin, made his grey eyes look almost silver. It was bold, visible, the complete opposite of everything he'd been taught about propriety and restraint. It was perfect. Draco unlocked the bathroom door and stepped out into the common room. The reaction was immediate. A third-year girl dropped the book she was holding. 2 boys by the fireplace stopped mid-conversation and stared. Marcus, who'd been organizing his textbooks on the table, looked up and froze. "Holy shit," Marcus said. "Your hair." "You noticed," Draco said mildly. "Noticed, dude, it's blue, like really, really blue." "I'm aware." The common room door burst open and Sage walked in, her arms full of library books. She took one look at Draco and started laughing, not mockery, but pure delight. "Oh my God," she said, dumping the books on the nearest table and crossing to him. "Daniel Morgan, you absolute legend. When did you do this?" "About half an hour ago." "It's brilliant, literally brilliant." "You look like you walked out of a punk rock concert." She circled him, examining the color from different angles. "I love it. This is so much better than boring brown." "Thanks," Draco said, and found himself smiling. Marcus was still staring. "But why?" Draco shrugged. "Why not? That's not an answer." "Sure it is." Draco met his roommate's eyes. "I spent my whole life being told how to look, how to act, who to be. I'm done with that. This is what I want." Sage grinned. "Good answer." More students were filtering into the common room now, drawn by the commotion. Draco felt their stares, heard the whispers. A year ago, the attention would have made him anxious, would have sent him calculating how to manage perceptions and control narratives. Now he just didn't care. Let them stare. Let them whisper. This was who he was. Come on, Sage said, linking her arm through his. Let's go to dinner. I want to see everyone's faces when you walk into the Great Hall. The course selection meeting with Professor Whitmore took place in her tower office the next morning. Draco climbed the spiral stairs, his blue hair catching the sunlight streaming through the windows. Whitmore looked up when he entered, and her eyebrows rose slightly. New look, Mr. Morgan. Yes, Professor. It suits you. She gestured to the chair across from her desk. Sit. We have much to discuss. Draco sat, feeling oddly nervous. He passed all 9 of his OWLS with outstanding marks. Technically, he'd completed the standard curriculum for his year level, but he had no idea what came next. You've put me in an interesting position, Whitmore said, pulling out a folder. We don't often have students complete their OWLS a year early. The last one was nearly 15 years ago. I'm sorry if I've caused complications. Don't apologize for excellence, Daniel. I'm simply explaining that we need to be creative with your schedule. She opened the folder, revealing several course listings. You have options. You could take NEWT level courses in your strongest subjects. You could pursue independent research. You could do both. Draco leaned forward, studying the papers. What would you recommend? That depends on your goals. What do you want to study? The question was simple, but the answer felt enormous. For the first time in his life, someone was asking what he wanted. Not what was expected, not what would look impressive, not what would please his father. What did he want? Ancient runes, he said slowly. I want to go deeper into runic theory and application. And arithmancy loved the mathematical precision of it, the way you can model magical systems numerically. He paused. And potions. Not just brewing, but understanding the underlying chemistry and magical interactions. Whitmore smiled. Then I propose this. Advanced ancient runes with me, where we'll work on independent research into protective ward systems. Advanced arithmancy with Professor Caldwell, focusing on theoretical modeling and predictive applications. And advanced potions with Professor Mertz, where you'll study innovative brewing techniques and potion development. That sounds perfect. It will be challenging. These aren't standard courses year seminars designed for 6th and 7th year students preparing for professional careers. You'll be the youngest in each class by at least 2 years. Draco thought about his first life, about sitting in Snape's classroom and pretending to struggle with potions he could brew in his sleep, about hiding his understanding of arithmancy because Crabbe and Goyle would mock him for it, about never, ever showing how much he loved the elegant complexity of ancient runes. I can handle it, he said. I know you can. Whitmore pulled out a schedule and began filling it in. We'll also add magical theory. It's a 7th-year elective, but I think you'll find it fascinating. It explores the fundamental principles underlying all magic. Thank you, Professor. She looked up, her expression serious. You've earned this, Daniel, not through connections or family name, but through genuine brilliance and hard work. Don't ever forget that. Draco's throat tightened. I won't. Advanced ancient runes met 3 times a week in Whitmore's tower classroom. There were only 6 students, all 6th or 7th years, all serious scholars who'd chosen to specialize in runic magic. Draco was acutely aware of being the youngest as he took his seat on the first day. The others glanced at him curiously, taking in his blue hair and 5th-year status. Welcome, Whitmore said, standing at the front of the classroom. This seminar focuses on advanced runic applications, particularly in the areas of warding, protection, and magical architecture. We'll be working both theoretically and practically. She gestured to the stone tablets lining the walls. Each of you will develop an independent research project this term. You'll propose a question, research existing runic systems, and develop your own theoretical framework. At the end of term, you'll present your findings. A 7th-year girl raised her hand. What kind of questions are we talking about? Anything that interests you. Previous students have researched runic healing systems, communication networks, temporal wards, even experimental applications in transfiguration. Whitmore's eyes found Draco. Mr. Morgan, you mentioned an interest in protective wards. Would you like to elaborate? Draco felt the other student's attention shift to him. A year ago, he would have deflected, downplayed his knowledge. Now he met Whitmore's gaze steadily. I'm interested in layered ward system show. Different runic sequences can be combined to create adaptive protections that respond to different types of threats. Most wards are static, designed to block specific dangers. But theoretically, you could create a dynamic system that analyzes incoming magic and adjusts its defensive properties accordingly. The classroom was silent. Then a sixth-year boy with dark skin and intelligent eyes leaned forward. That's actually brilliant. Like a magical immune system. Exactly, Draco said, warming to the topic. The challenge is creating runes that can process information quickly enough to respond in real time. You'd need some kind of decision tree structure, probably using arithmetic modeling to predict threat patterns, which would require integrating two separate magical disciplines. Whitmore interrupted, smiling. Ambitious. I like it. Is it possible? The seventh-year girl asked. That's what research is for, Whitmore said. Mr. Morgan, I think you've found your project. Advanced arithmancy was equally challenging. Professor Caldwell, headmaster's sister, stern and brilliant, asked them a problem on the first day that made Draco's brain hurt in the best possible way. Model the magical energy distribution in a standard Patronus charm, she said, writing the parameters on the board. Account for caster ability, emotional state, and environmental factors. Show your work. Draco bent over his parchment, his quill flying. This was complex multiple variables, nonlinear relationships, probability distributions for emotional variance. He lost himself in the mathematics, building equations and testing models. When he finally looked up, an hour had passed. Most of the other students were still working, their faces tight with concentration. Draco checked his work one more time, then raised his hand. Caldwell came over, reading his parchment. Her eyebrows rose. You've accounted for memory specificity, she said. Yes, happier memories produce stronger patronuses, but the relationship isn't linear. There's a threshold effectance. You reach a certain emotional intensity. Additional happiness provides diminishing returns. I modeled it as a logarithmic function. And this variable here, magical exhaustion. If the caster is tired, their ability to channel energy decreases exponentially. I included a fatigue coefficient. Caldwell studied his work for a long moment. Then she looked at him, her expression unreadable. This is NEWT level work, Mr. Morgan, possibly beyond. Thank you, Professor. I'm not complimenting you. I'm stating a fact. She tapped his parchment. I want you to expand this into a full paper, 15 inches, due in 2 weeks. If it's good enough, we'll submit it to the Journal of Theoretical Arithmancy. Draco blinked. The journal? You're capable of publishable work. You might as well publish it. She moved on to the next student, leaving Draco staring at his equations. Publishable work. At 15. He bent back over his parchment, already thinking about how to expand his model. Advanced potions met in the dungeons, but the atmosphere was nothing like Snape's classroom. Professor Mertz was enthusiastic and encouraging, treating potion-making as an art form worthy of experimentation. Today, he announced, we're going to improve a standard potion. Choose any potion you like: sleeping draft, pepper up, wit sharpening, whatever interests you. Your task is to modify the brewing process to enhance efficiency, potency, or stability. Draco chose the draft of peace. It was notoriously difficult, requiring precise timing and temperature control. Most brewers followed the standard method. Simmer for exactly 7 minutes, add powdered moonstone, stir 3 times counterclockwise. But Draco had been thinking about this potion since 4th year. The moonstone addition always felt inefficient to you, lost nearly 30% of the active compounds to premature crystallization. What if you changed the order? He set up his cauldron and began brewing, but instead of adding moonstone at the standard time, he waited. He let the base potion simmer for an additional 3 minutes, allowing the hellebore and valerian to fully integrate. Then he added the moonstone in smaller increments, stirring continuously to prevent crystallization. The potion turned the correct silver blue, but the consistency was smoother, more uniform. Mertz came over to inspect. He tested the potion with a detection spell, and his eyes widened. Mister Morgan, this is 40% more potent than the standard brew. The extended simmer time allows better compound integration, Draco explained, and the incremental moonstone addition prevents crystallization loss. Have you documented this method? Not yet. Do so. This is exactly the kind of innovation professional brewers need, Mertz grinned. You're going to make some potioneer very angry when you publish this and make their standard method obsolete. Draco couldn't help smiling. Good. The library had become his second home. Most evenings, Draco could be found at the large table by the window, surrounded by books and parchment, working on his various projects. He was rarely alone. Okay, I don't understand this at all, Keisha said, pushing her transfiguration homework across the table. How do you calculate the mass energy conversion for partial transformations? Draco looked up from his arithmancy paper. Show me what you've got so far. She pointed to her equations. I got this part base conversion rate. But when you're only transforming part of an object, I don't know how to account for the boundary effects. Think of it like a gradient, Draco said, pulling her parchment closer. The transformation doesn't happen all at once. There's a transition zone where the magic is actively converting matter. You need to integrate across that boundary. He sketched out the equation, explaining each step. Keisha watched intently, occasionally asking questions. Oh, she said finally. Oh, that makes sense. It's like magical calculus. Exactly. You're really good at this, she said. Teaching, I mean, you should be a professor. Draco blinked, surprised. I'm 15. So, you explain things better than half our actual professors, she grinned. Thanks, Daniel. I actually understand this now. Across the table, Tommy was struggling with his own homework and arithmancy problem set that had him nearly in tears. I hate this, he muttered. I hate numbers. Why did I take this class? Because you're good at it when you stop panicking, Sage said, not looking up from her own work. I'm not good at it. I'm terrible. Draco set down his quill. What's the problem? Tommy showed him the question of probability calculation involving multiple spell interactions. Okay, Draco said. Let's break it down. What's the first thing you need to find? The individual probabilities. Right, so start there. Don't think about the whole problem, just that first step. He walked Tommy through it, patient and methodical, until the other boy's face cleared. I got it, Tommy said, sounding amazed. I actually got it. See, you're not terrible. You just needed to slow down. Marcus looked up from his own work. You know you're basically running a tutoring service, right? Half the fourth years come to you before they go to their actual professors. That's not true, Draco said. It absolutely is, Jake said, joining them with his own stack of books. I heard some third years talking about you in the common room. They called you the blue-haired genius who actually explains things. Draco felt his face heat. That's ridiculous. It's accurate, Sage said, finally looking up. You're good at this, Daniel. You should own it. Later, after the others had gone to bed, Draco stayed in the library, working on his runic research. He was deep in a text about Norse protective magic when a nervous voice interrupted him. Excuse me. He looked up. A third-year girl stood there, clutching a transfiguration textbook. Can I help you? I'm sorry to bother you, but I'm really struggling with switching spells, and someone said you might be able to explain them. She looked terrified, like she expected him to refuse. Draco remembered being that scared, that uncertain. He remembered what it felt like to struggle alone. Of course, he said, gesturing to the chair beside him. Show me what you're working on. Her face lit up with relief. They worked together for an hour. Draco explained the theory, demonstrated the wand movement, helped her understand why the spell worked the way it did. By the end, she was successfully switching objects, her face glowing with pride. "Thank you so much," she said. "You're a really good teacher." After she left, Draco sat alone in the quiet library, surrounded by books and parchment and the warm glow of magical lights. He'd spent his first life hoarding knowledge, using it as currency and leverage. Now he was giving it away freely, and somehow that felt infinitely more valuable. Weekend trips to Manhattan became a regular routine. Every Saturday morning, Draco took the portkey to the city and made his way to Ramirez's gym. His technique had improved dramatically over the summer. Coach Ramirez noticed immediately. "Look at you," she said, watching him work the heavy bag. "Actually using your hips now, keeping your guard up." "You've been practicing." "Every day," Draco said between punches. "Show me your combinations." He demonstrated jab, cross, hook, uppercut, flowing smoothly from one strike to the next. His footwork was cleaner, his balance better. The movements felt natural now, instinctive. Ramirez nodded approvingly. "Good, you're ready for sparring." She paired him with a college student named Marcus, not his roommate, a different Marcus who had several years of experience. They touched gloves and began. Draco had sparred before, but never against someone this skilled. Marcus was fast, technical, constantly testing his defense. Draco had to think, had to read his opponent's movements and respond. It was exhilarating. He blocked a jab, countered with a cross, ducked under a hook. His body moved without conscious thought, pure reaction and training. When Marcus landed a clean shot to his ribs, Draco grinned and came back harder. By the end of the round, both of them were breathing hard. "Not bad," Marcus said, bumping his gloves. "You've got good instincts." "Thanks," Ramirez called them over. "Daniel, you're telegraphing your right hook. See how you drop your shoulder before you throw? That's giving him time to react." She demonstrated the correct technique, and Draco adjusted. They went another round, and this time his hooks landed more consistently. After training, Draco sat on the bench, drinking water and feeling the pleasant ache of exhausted muscles. This was different from magic, more immediate, more physical, but it served the same purpose: control, discipline, proof that he could be strong. The first care package arrived on a Tuesday morning. Draco was eating breakfast when a large barn owl swooped into the great hall, carrying a package wrapped in brown paper and twine. It landed directly in front of him, hooting importantly. "What's that?" Marcus asked. Draco untied the package, his heart suddenly racing. The return address was written in his mother's elegant script. Inside, he found a tin of homemade biscuits, still warm from a heating charm, smelling of butter and vanilla. A set of new robes in deep blue-horned serpent colors that Narcissa had clearly tailored herself, the stitching perfect and precise. A small painting, no bigger than his hand, showing the Connecticut mansion in autumn, leaves turning gold and red, and a letter. "My dearest Draco, I hope your second year is off to a wonderful start. I'm still learning to cook. The biscuits are my third attempt. First two were inedible, but I think these turned out well. The robes are my first attempt at tailoring. I took a class at the community center. Can you imagine? Me in a Muggle community center, learning to sew with a group of retired grandmothers. It was lovely. The house is beautiful in autumn. I've been painting the library walls, not pictures, though I'm taking an art class too. I chose a warm cream color. I think you'll like it. I miss you terribly, but I'm so proud of you. Build your life, sweetheart. Learn everything. Be brilliant and kind and free. All my love." Mom. Draco read the letter 3 times, his throat tight. "Your mom?" Sage asked gently. "Yeah." He showed them the painting. "She's learning to paint." "That's beautiful," Keisha said. Draco carefully packed everything back into the box, except for one biscuit, which he ate slowly. It tasted like home. The packages became a monthly tradition. Every few weeks, a new box would arrive, sometimes with baked goods, sometimes with books Narcissa thought he'd enjoy, sometimes with silly Muggle items she'd discovered and wanted to share. Each one included a letter detailing her adventures in independence. She wrote about cooking classes and art lessons, about exploring nearby towns and making friends with the neighbors. She wrote about the garden she was planting, about learning to drive, terrifying but exhilarating, about reading books she'd never had time for before. She wrote about being happy. Draco kept every letter in a box under his bed. On difficult days, he'd take them out and read them, reminding himself that they'd both escaped, that they were both free. His animagus form had become second nature. Most mornings, Draco woke before dawn, transformed, and flew out over the mountains. The transformation was instantaneous, no one-moment human. The next, a raven, black feathers and hollow bones, and the fierce joy of flight. He'd explored every peak and valley around Ilvermorny, knew the best thermal currents and the quietest glades. Sometimes he flew alone, reveling in the solitude. Sometimes Sage joined him. Her animagus form was a red-tailed hawk, sharp-eyed and graceful. They'd soar together, two birds dancing through the morning sky. One Saturday, Draco flew farther than usual, following a river valley deep into the wilderness. He landed on a cliff overlooking a pristine lake, the water so clear he could see fish swimming below. This was freedom. Not just the absence of his father's control, but the presence of choice. He could be here in this moment simply because he wanted to be. He spread his wings and called out a raven's harsh cry that echoed across the valley. Then he took flight again, heading home. November arrived with the first snow. Draco stood at the common room window, watching fat flakes drift past, and thought about the approaching holidays. 2 weeks, Marcus said, joining him. You heading home for break? Yeah, my mom and I have plans. Like what? Draco smiled. Baking together. She wants to teach me to make proper Christmas biscuits. And we're going to paint the librarish picked out colors, but wanted to wait so we could do it together. And there's a town nearby with a Christmas market she wants to explore. That sounds nice. It does, doesn't it? Draco turned from the window. What about you? Going back to San Francisco. My parents are already planning this huge family dinner. Marcus grinned. My grandmother makes these dumplings that are absolutely incredible. I've been dreaming about them since September. They stood together, watching the snow fall, both thinking about home. Later that evening, Draco wrote to his mother, Dear Mom, I can't wait for break. 2 weeks feels impossibly far away, but also too close. I have 3 papers due and a practical exam in Transfiguration before then. Classes are going well. Better than well, actually. I'm working on research that might get published, which is terrifying and exciting. Professor Whitmore thinks my runic ward system has real practical applications. Professor Caldwell wants me to present my arithmancy paper at a student symposium next term. I'm happy here. I have friends who actually like me, not because of my name or my family, but because of who I am. I'm learning things that fascinate me. I'm good at things, and I'm allowed to be good at them. But I miss you. I miss having someone to talk to who knows all of both Daniel and Draco. I miss home. Only 2 more weeks. Love, Draco. He sealed the letter and took it to the owlery, watching his owl disappear into the snowy night. 2 more weeks, and he'd be home. Really home with his mother in the house they'd chosen together. He'd bake biscuits and paint walls and explore Christmas markets. He'd tell her about his research and his friends and his life. He'd be both versions of himself, Draco and Daniel, integrated and whole. He'd be free. Draco walked back to the common room, his blue hair dusted with snow, and found his friends gathered around the fireplace. Sage was arguing with Jake about the best defensive spells. Marcus was helping Tommy with homework. Keisha was reading, her feet tucked under her. They looked up when he entered, and Sage patted the empty seat beside her. There you are. Come settle this argument. Jake thinks shield charms are superior to Pratigo Maxima, and he's objectively wrong. I'm not wrong. You're completely wrong. Draco sat down, letting their familiar bickering wash over him. This was his life now. These were his people. This was his home. And in 2 weeks, he'd have his other home too, the one with his mother, the one they'd built together from courage and choice. He was Draco Malfoy and Daniel Morgan. He was a son and a student and a friend and a raven. He was brilliant and kind and complex and free. and he was, finally, impossibly, exactly where he was meant to be. The snow fell outside, soft and silent, covering the world in white. Inside, the fire crackled, his friends laughed, and Draco smiled. He was home, in every sense of the word.